Hello YouTube. Hello YouTube. This is Ben Gessel. Like many of you guys, I'm getting scam calls and things. So that's what happened. So if I seem a little bit angry, that's why. It interrupted my YouTube video. Um, so I'll try to avoid acting that way, of course. So let's try to figure out a solution to this, shall we? Something that is free and that maybe the police can get involved with this kind of stuff. Because I imagine this probably affects you guys too. So I'm talking again mostly about music instruction here, general music instruction stuff. And I was talking about parents and things and understanding what parents want. So in my experience, most parents leave me alone. A few don't. If I respond aggressively or shut them down, they're likely to not have lessons with me, and they're likely to, go online and say bad things about me. So, of course, you can't always please everyone. But the funny thing is that there's a difference between this please everyone commercial business approach to teaching music and my way or the highway, college, academic oriented, or older style teaching. And I imagine that, there's other ways of not talking about, other stuff, of course, but this clash of approaches to just, we're talking about students that may not be music majors, or they might. I mean, look, you never know, but what's going to happen to with different kids sometimes. But what I'm also trying to say is that there should be some kind of middle ground between being completely anything goes and something completely opposite, where they have to get every single note correct, every single rhythm correct before they move on. With beginners, with people that are more kind of, treating lessons as more of a hobby or more of a side interest rather than a super serious interest. Now, me as a private music instructor, yes, I would like to have more serious students, of course. But, there are other things to be taught. There are other things that students need to be exposed to. So if you have worked on something for an entire year, it's the same piece, and it's not very lengthy, and it's not very advanced, I think something's wrong, and that student's probably not even going to last that long before they've quit lessons with that teacher. Okay, so, I've had to deal with cultural differences again. I've had to understand better teaching students in their own home. I've had to deal with even sometimes different religious aspects that different families have, trying to work with them, trying to avoid anything unpleasant, avoiding any conflicts in that area. And hopefully my impartiality has been the right way to go about doing these kinds of things. There are people out there that will refuse to have lessons with people from a more or less respectable religion just because of their religion. And I'm aware of that, and I think it's ridiculous. And I think that religious conflict and music instruction in the home, or a lot of other tutoring things, or whatever, it should be pretty apparent that one of these things is good. Education is good. Is religious conflict good? No, it is not. Of course, it's also, I'm not saying that we should, all should be compelled to belong to the same religion. Of course, I'm not saying that. But when you take lessons from a teacher, you're taking lessons from that teacher based on that teacher's musical abilities as well as their good character. You're not taking lessons from someone based on their religious beliefs. That's a nice additional bonus benefit, right? you might feel more comfortable with that instructor being the same religion as you. Whatever, there's all these kinds of things. So talking about your, parents' own kids, but music instructors, you're taking lessons from them from a musical. This is all about music, right? And so, if somebody is a Jehovah's Witness or they're Mormon or they're Muslim or some religion that you don't agree with and maybe you're uncomfortable with, I think it's a very erroneous idea to think that instructor is automatically going to try to proselyte to your kids. That's such a stupid and ridiculous idea. It's archaic. This is one of the reasons why people get so upset by people that are very zealously religious. It's one of the main things. It's because of this tunnel-minded way of looking at humanity and life. But we're talking about music lessons. Look, if there is someone if I want to learn how to play the sitar, and the best sitar player I know is Hindu or whatever, or let's say it's the shofar or something, or I don't know, it's something more Middle Eastern, and the best player in that regard in the area is Muslim, or maybe it's a more Western instrument and the guy is Muslim, or maybe, as long as the person has a good character, someone I respect personally, they could believe in flying spaghetti monster, and that's okay with me. But I do understand the parents that have concerns in this regard. But unless the teacher starts proselyting to your kid, it's not something to worry about. You should be more concerned about their character rather than their religion. But aside from all that, this is all piano stuff, because we start getting into horn and composition. It's a smaller group of people, somewhat, I think we're talking about. So. So when I'm teaching intermediates, I hate it when a student gets to a certain point in their age and life gets busier for them, crazier, and what they're involved with gets harder, and so everything that they're doing takes more time to do well, And sometimes I wonder, if some parents are too. I don't know. I just know that when you're in your teen years, nobody wants to lose a teenage student that's doing well. And that really stinks. You can have younger kids that are more advanced as well, and that stinks as well. But if they move on to a different teacher or something, I don't know. But it's just we don't like to lose more skilled students. Especially students we put more time and energy into teaching them, and so that's tough to deal with. And so, the best thing to do is just hope for the best, and if you will still get great students in the future. I think if you can work with a student for, I think on average I've had probably students that I've taught, the average time I've been teaching any student I think is about 2 to 3 years. If you teach a student for 4 years or more, that's amazing. That's awesome. That's what we all want, for some students. But 2 or 3 sometimes is in general, I think, more the norm for, outside of college, just regular private instruction. Of course, in college, you might have a student, again, for just those 4 years. If they're undergrad, and just a few for grad sometimes. It just depends, But so, it's just that it's when you have put more time and effort into teaching a certain student that's tough to have that student go. And depends on the teacher. But many teachers are really able to separate any sentimental feelings towards students from just their working relationship with student parent, sort of thing. They're able to separate those things very well. For me, because I spend so much time and energy with each kid I teach, it's hard, because you come to understand that kid better. I think it's hard for all teachers somewhat, but for some more than others. And so if I were to operate differently, if I were to be suing people for, breaching contract if they, sign up for year-long lessons or each half year. And if I were just to be all about business, oh man, my life would be miserable. I could never do that. But, some people, that's what they do. And so then maybe they get their reputation, more or less, for being that way. And so there's pros and cons, I think, of being more of a friendly type music instructor as opposed to all about business. But ultimately for myself, and this is going to get into French horn and composition. French horn and composition I'm more skilled at, of course, especially composition. And so that's the students I want to attract more in the future. And so as time goes by, I probably want to look more in that direction rather than still teaching a lot of beginner pianists. But because of the way I am, I think a lot of parents like my teaching. But that's there shouldn't be conflicts. I think all music instructors should be aware enough of different kinds of folks, teaching situations to either say, I'm not a good fit for this parent, student, or if it does work, I just am very flexible, and I feel great about how able I am to be flexible because it's not something that really comes always very naturally to me. Yes and no. It's a yes and no. So when I read parents well, students well, and it's a great feeling, but there are even greater feelings that I need to pursue for myself regarding composition and French horn. Now, without making this part 2 too long, I'm talking about piano a bit more here, somewhat. So I mean, I don't know. I use a lot of my own music when I'm teaching. I just don't. I put some importance into what other folks are doing, but I think it kind of comes down to observing what's actually being learned. And if you, as a music instructor, really see that a student is learning and improving based on what you're doing, then stick with that stuff. And you can always try other things, along with all the things that students ought to be getting in their music instruction. But I mean, if something's working, stay with it. If it's not working, there are instructors that, for some reason or other, if it's hard to know if something's really being learned, all the instructor needs to do is have someone repeat back to them what you just said to them. If you think they weren't listening or their minds were elsewhere, attention troubles, or just have them repeat back what you just asked them or said, and then have them play something that you've been working on, discussing for a bit. Have them actually play it, and if you notice improvements, something is clicking. If there's no improvements, the kid is just acting like they're listening, but they're not. Their eyes might be glazed over, and you kind of didn't see that fully. So with French horn, it's very demanding in terms of accuracy, in terms of all kinds of stuff. And so, so right now I'm working a lot with kids, and one young man is older. I'm just working a lot on just basic methods, just just having doing a lot of playing, I guess. If they're less prepared, or if we need to touch on subjects, we'll do that. With horn lessons, I will often get into some discussion of something, and we might not get to everything that they've been assigned, and that's okay. I had a horn instructor that would be a little bit verbose that way, but I learned a little bit more about some things, whether it's music history, or whether it was stopped horn, or whether it was transposing, or whether it was, the stylistic things about some composers. Whatever it was, it was all very meaningful when I had horn professors like that. Some horn professors are just all about playing and, how you're doing with this, and just the physical thing, and they're both important, approaches, but I've had both. I've had other instructors that are kind of maybe just try to use as few words as possible, but they're I don't know, maybe a different approach, slightly different approach. It's more of a physical, technical kind of approach, and I don't know. I have to go back and look at all my professors, other instructors, a bit more how they did things, but I think that the horn can be very discouraging. So I often have students that don't continue on the horn. A lot of fifth grade and sixth grade folks that just don't really stick with it very long. And to be honest, I don't know if I really want those students that much. I guess they're okay. It's fine. Sure, I have no objection. But of course, like everybody else, I prefer folks to stay more in the long term, kind of thing. But it's something I'm aware of. You have that time period where band students are trying different things. So it's helpful to know right off the bat how likely a student is to stick with the horn. And, all kinds of the things that maybe you have a student that enjoys it quite a bit, but maybe they're not just as much of a natural fit for the horn because it requires a very keen ear and, a little bit more higher IQ in some respects. And so it's just a hard instrument, and maybe a student's better cut out for trumpet or trombone, or, a lot of hornists also make a good double reed players or woodwind players because, there's kind of a bit more of a scholarly, serious, really kind of just detail-oriented focus about things, maybe, particularly with oboe and bassoon and horn connection. And some folks are very meticulous about cleaning their instruments or making sure they're not ever having anything sugary before they play. That can be good, but that's especially another case with woodwinds and whatever. But sure, but okay. So I'm familiar with all these things in the horn. It's just that I don't know. The piano is really the instrument where you do have a lot more of a hobby approach to it sometimes, or at least a lot of horn teachers are much less tolerant of the hobbyist hornists, I think you could say. That just seems to be the case, at least in the United States. With composition, I just am teaching composition very differently than I think a lot of the other people that do composition. And there are a lot of teachers that just don't teach composition in a tonal sense. Or if they do teach tonal music composition, kind of things, they also do piano or they do some other instrument, incorporated with composition. And I think that this needs to change. I think, there probably have been people that write tonal music primarily that do teach that, but they're often not very either numerous or not a lot of people know about them. And so I'd like to see more people teaching tonal music. I'd like to see younger people becoming better composers at a younger age and being just more competent composers, many different styles. And so that's what I'm going to be doing, at least for the time being, is that's one of the kind of areas that I'm most excited about getting more into that. There are great things about college, the way things have been taught in college to music majors, but it's not perfect, and it needs to evolve with times. It needs to change. So I am open to. I'm familiar somewhat with some other piano instructors and other folks that have things that they're doing that are they're more effective, perhaps. But because there's so many things that I've been learning on my own about myself and how I teach best and how students learn best, I just at some point maybe I'll get more into this. Well, what are you doing? For the time being, though, it's just I continue to find I'm improving as a teacher, just based on But I've always been open to looking at things a different way, perhaps. And that's particularly the case with anything of a psychological nature with different students. So it works best with students with different psychological makeups and things. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this guy up here, but this is part 2 of this guy. But if you guys have any thoughts or comments, of course, leave them below. I'll catch you guys later. Thanks. Bye.